Just doing a quick test of the microphone. Just doing a quick test of the microphone. Good. Just doing a quick test of the microphone. Good. Let's see how we look here. It's hard to tell. Oh, it looks good. It's better on the screen. It is on my little screen here. So, alrighty. Let's see if I can make this thing work. Yeah. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. Hi everybody, welcome to Satsang. Hopefully people are managing to get here. We did have the time change here in the United States last night, so we went back an hour. So people may have shown up a little bit early, because it was confused last week. Because I guess last week, the week before, Europe went onto off of daylight savings time, back to winter time. So anyway, hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm so glad to be here. This is my favorite. Only then it will sound. Now this one, the felt on this guy is beginning to wear out, so I can't get the same kind of. It's harder to get the friction on it to make the sound. I need to replace the striker. At any rate, welcome to Satsang, everyone. This is my favorite time of the week, and hopefully it is for you as well. And again, I always like to remind everybody why we're here, why we take this time on a Sunday afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you happen to be, to focus our attention on ourselves. And you know, it's funny when you say that, focus your attention on yourself. For many people, that's interpreted as being a very selfish thing to do. We shouldn't be focusing, we should be focusing on others. But the fact of the matter is you really can't know anything or anyone unless you know yourself. Because the eyes through which we see the world determine completely what our experience of the world is. If you're wearing green glasses, the world looks green. If you're wearing yellow glasses, everything looks yellow. And we all have on the lenses of our conditioning, the lenses of our mixture of pure being, which we all are, and the conditioned habits and patterns of mind. And those mixed all together in a mismatch, are like, they literally create this sense of a separate self acting in the world feels limited, feels lacking, it feels stuck, feels unhappy. And if you're looking at the world through those eyes, you're not going to see things as they actually are. You're not going to see people as they actually are. Relationships are going to be more difficult because you're looking at an image in the mind and not actually seeing who or what is right in front of you. And this is the common problem. And oftentimes in relationships, what we're doing really is, we want to find somebody that confirms our false sense of self, that makes it feel more secure and stable, because that's all the ego does is seek to find something to make it feel safe and secure, which you can never know. You simply cannot know it. I titled this particular week, The Simplicity of Being. And I chose that because I'm going to invite you all, as we get started into satsang, before the questions start coming, I want you to first check in with the essential, unchanging, timeless part of yourself. That's not as abstract as it might seem. And the way we do that, you can close your eyes if you like for a moment, is to simply bring your attention to the sense, the feeling, the intuition of simply being, of just existing. It's like our attention, which is forever focused on objects, it relaxes itself and attempts to turn around to see what it is that's looking through the attention. What is it that's actually cognizing? Now, you can't really do that with sight, because you can't, the inner dimension is not a physical dimension. It's not like it's inside your head. It's a non-physical dimension. The realm of consciousness is not an object. It's not a thing that can be perceived. So we're just kind of feeling the sense of existence. And there's a clear sense to it, isn't there? There's a clear feeling that you exist, and that you're aware of that existence. It's not like a rock or a mountain which does not appear to be conscious of its existence. You are. And just notice it. It's very simple. It's not dramatic. It's not great spiritual experiences. And now just let all your thoughts go about it, what that is. Thoughts come up, you just notice them, and notice that those thoughts are being seen by this simple sense of being. You know yourself, but not as an object. You just know. You just are. Now, our minds, and the minds of most people, will argue, well, that's great, but how does that help me? And that's really just an argument of the mind to turn its attention back towards objects. And as it does that, the sense of a separate self arises again, and with it, all of its problems. That thought What good does this simple sense of being do? Yeah, it's there, but what does it do for me? Is a clear statement of wanting something to fix or change or repair or transcend your life. I'm inviting you into the essence of all experience. If this wasn't there, would you be experiencing anything at all? So while it's ordinary, it's quiet, it's utterly simple, notice that without it, there really is nothing. This is yourself, the self everybody seeks. Just a moment of recognition that this is the essence of your being is what's called awakening. That's all there is to it. No special experiences, no heavens parting, no miracles, just this. Now notice how quiet it is, how still. Does it have any fear? Does it have any lack? Is anything missing from it? This is your actual experience. This isn't a spiritual idea that I'm planting in your head. This is your actual experience. See if you can find a boundary to this sense of being. Has it ever been different? Has it ever changed? Has any of the experiences you've had in your life, no matter how ecstatic or how terrible, has any of those affected it, changed it, made it something other than this? This recognition that this is your actual nature, peaceful, fearless, boundless, limitless, deathless. Now this is all, I use all of those words describing what I'm looking at, what I'm experiencing. To say looking at is not quite accurate because I'm not looking at it like an object. It's an inner looking. I'm knowing it because I am it. So as you get ready to come back from this little meditation, it's quite natural for mind to get engaged again, but as questions are coming up for you, refer back to that ground. You can call it the ground of being, you can call it the field of awareness. The important transition to make, and you can just open your eyes whenever you feel ready, is to let the sense of identity sink back into there. Not a personal identity like a man or a woman, and a white man, a black woman, an Asian child, old, young, rich, poor, smart, dumb. None of the descriptions of a particular form. Because this inner space is the origin of all forms, and it has no form. It is the infinite field of potential. It is empty, but it is not nothing. It is the vastness of existence prior to anything actually taking form as a manifestation. All possibilities, everything that ever was, is, or could be, is that, arises from that. This is the great mystery, that the great emptiness produces the infinitude of form. And it is the potential for everything, which is why it is being itself. And the beingness that you experience, the beingness of the bowl I hit earlier, the beingness of the computer in front of you, all derive from that same place, which when you touch it, you recognize that that is your very being. It is the being of everything. So once again, welcome. Let's go take a look-see. Yashua, hello. Yashua, nice to have you. Dale, great to see you. Tuning in from Boston. Rosario, nice to be here again. Thank you. Hi, Rosario. Yashua, namaskaram pranam. I have no idea what you're saying, but thank you. We have question marks on it, so it looks like it's a question, but I don't know what it is. Hello, Ava from Poland. Yashua, don't touch the bowl too high. Oh, with the stick. Only then it will sound. Yeah. There is a technique to it, and I haven't got it quite yet. Alessandra from Monterey. Hello, Alessandra. David Rose in Massachusetts. Dale Wiggins. My mother-in-law has had problems with depression and mood disorder for 30 plus years. A lot of it comes from feeling as if everything is revolving around herself, and thinking that everyone is thinking of her, good and bad. Do you have a recommendation to try to shift her perception? Maybe a psychologist with a non-dual focus. It wouldn't require a psychologist with a non-dual focus. It really depends on exactly how deep the depression is, how off she's gotten. Would depend. I mean, a satsang like this may have no effect because it'll just be all over her head. She may need some very practical support. Don't go to psychiatrist. My personal opinion, I'm not a doctor, but they just tend to drug. Put somebody on a drug and forget about it. There's plenty of genuine, really awake, not necessarily non-dual awake, but awake therapists who are genuine beings who might be able to help. Whenever somebody comes to me with a question about a family member that they care about that is is suffering from something, what I say is that the first thing to do, Christ put it beautifully. He said, before you can take the sliver out of your brother's eye, you have to remove the log from your own. The essence of genuine spiritual healing is the altitude of mind of the healer. There's no magic in the words that they might say to somebody, there's no special formula to give from somebody. It is the image that you, as a healer or potential healer or a coach, hold of the person that you're working with. If you see them as broken, as disturbed, as problematic, if you see them that way and hold that image, that energy is going to communicate with it. And for those who are not very conscious of themselves, they tend to respond to the environment because they're not conscious. And one of the things about this depression and various kinds of mental and emotional illness or disruption is that there's a very undeveloped sense of self that kind of makes them just kind of fit the pattern of whatever's of the dominant energy that's around them, because they don't have enough internally to kind of make a place, put a stake in the ground for themselves. So what I would recommend first is take some time with yourself to completely eradicate from your own consciousness the idea that this lovely woman is anything other than the manifestation of the ultimate reality, that she is of the same substance that you are. And then you can clearly make a separation between the conditioning that is rearing its head and the reality of her being. Now, if you are constantly bringing to your engagement with her that sense of her inherent beauty and perfection, that's the energy that's going to dominate the moment, and it will have its effect. When I teach people who are professional coaches and healers and the like, it's all about that. It's all about what is the image you're holding of somebody else. Ultimately, that is what will breaks it open, right? It takes the responsibility off of anybody to fix somebody else, and you only have to deal with what is appearing in your consciousness. And when it's clear there, and you are unintimidated by the circumstances, and you're unafraid, you become a beacon of light that they can gravitate. They can find their way to that light. But if there's this undercurrent, there's something wrong, what we can do to fix you, they're going to gravitate towards that. Now, that's not to say that you might find very practical help for her in many, many forms, in a variety of different forms. Matter of fact, you probably will. It could be a variety of things. It could be diet, right? It could be toxicity in the diet. There could be all sorts of things, because we live in a very toxic environment. There's constant messages, as well as in our foods and cosmetics. I mean, this is the world we live in. So get clear first, and don't be really clear, completely clear yourself, because when you do, then you see clearly to remove the sliver from your brothers. You'll see it very clearly, and you yourself, your very presence will be a healing influence. Because do we not naturally respond to people who value us, who are holding the highest view of us? Don't we just gravitate towards that? It's simply the way it is. And if somebody isn't capable of doing that for themselves, then you simply do it for them. You hold that image. When you go, like in the opening little exercise they do, when you go to that place that is just pure, the simplicity of being, that's them too. That's their foundation. Now, they don't know about that yet. They've not woken up enough to the point where they're walking back in that direction, but you have, which means that this doesn't appear just when we look at it. It's that simplicity of being is there all the time, which means it's in her right this second, which means you can see it. It will, the, the, the two energies that are actually one will tend to find each other. So I think that's all I have to say on that right now. So tell me if that works for you, if that helps you, Chris. I certainly understand it, and I raised two kids. There were times when, oh my God, what's going to happen to them, right? And the same thing. I have a granddaughter now that I'm very close to. I watch these kind of things. What can I do? What really can I do? I mean, you can't interfere with life. Life runs its course in every being. But I can certainly create the environment in which the very best is brought out of everyone who's involved, and that's a magnificent power that we all have. So, Chris, hello, GP. When you say you must do this, you must do that, who are you speaking to? Me? There is no me, so instructions are for attention. You're speaking to attention. Yes, but Chris, don't be really clear that the egoic mind is quite capable of commandeering non-dual language and ideas to perpetuate itself. So when I tell you to redirect your attention back to yourself, that which is looking at the attention and redirecting it back is the self. It is not the self. You say, you must do this. There's no me, so instructions for attention, right? No, there is a you, right? There's not a finite, limited you. There's not a separate self you. There is a you. There is a sense of being focused outward, and that sense of being is naturally now in everybody here turning back inward. But that's not unreal. The sense of a separate self, when somebody says there is no self, there is no one there, that's neo-Advaita nonsense. And I can't emphasize that enough. Yes, there is someone. Consciousness is real. Consciousness has identified with conditioning and therefore imagining itself to be a separate self. That separate self doesn't exist. But the only reason we can even talk about a separate self, the illusion of a separate self, is because consciousness does exist. And consciousness has identified itself with the separate self. Now, folks, this isn't a mistake. Unless consciousness focuses its attention, the world doesn't exist. Nothing exists. The focusing of attention of consciousness is what creates the universe. This is how creation takes place. Consciousness, not an individual. And what happens when it does that is the universe is filled with objects and forms and beings and life and all of it, all being experienced by consciousness. Of course, it is the condensing or precipitation of consciousness that brings the universe into being. That's what the Big Bang really symbolizes. Take it out of time and put it into the sense of timelessness, and what you have is simply consciousness precipitating itself into form, never losing its actual essential nature as consciousness, but giving rise to form. Right? Then within that arises the idea that somehow the form exists independently of the consciousness. That's the nature of experience. And awakening is when the very same consciousness which precipitated that turns around and starts walking back to its center, because it never was that individual. So the awakening that you've experienced, that you are not that individual, was not a personal accomplishment on your part. You didn't wake up. Consciousness woke itself up. awareness awakes itself up. Now, of course, awareness has never really been asleep. It's always been awareness. But there is this dream of the individual life. And if we didn't have that, there'd be no experience. You have to understand that. If consciousness does not condense itself into form, there is no experience. It is just this infinite ocean of potential with nothing ever happening. But things do happen. So be clear, right? To say there's no one here, of course there is. You're here, right? The question is whether or not you're here or not, or if there's nobody here. The question is, who are you? Of course you're here. You're hearing my voice. You're seeing me, right? You're asking the question. Of course there's someone here. The question is, who is it? It's always a case of mistaken identity, the consciousness mistaking itself for the form, rather than seeing the form as simply the self-image of consciousness, held in consciousness and made of consciousness. So now let me address the other question. Attention is what gives rise to this thing, to this. Let me see if I can explain this. The word exist and existence comes from a Latin word, existare, and it means to stand forth, right? It means to basically come out of the background and stand as a independent from the background, right? Of course, it's made out of the background, right? And it can just fall right back into the background. So it's made of that material. It's as if just some kind of form came out of the white wall behind me. Exactly the same color, exactly the same substance, but there's a little, something seems to come forward, there's a little bit of a shadow, and suddenly a form appears. That's existence. That's being called forth. It doesn't have an independent existence. It is not made of something else. It is not independent or foreign to the place from which it emerged. But in the focus of attention, something emerges. It emerges out of the background. The background is always the infinitude of pure potential. This happens all the time. Everybody I'm sure has had the experience of getting so into something, your attention was so focused that suddenly all sorts of little details and minutiae began to pop out to you that you did not see before. You're literally calling them into existence. Now, when you do that, what happens? The more focused the attention is, the more stuff on the periphery just kind of disappears, doesn't it? It's as if it isn't there. And then suddenly, something gets you their attention, or the attention begins to withdraw back, relaxes a bit, and suddenly there's this, and then the details, they disappear back into the background again. So this focus of attention is a power of creation. That's how creation works. It isn't something comes into being. Something is simply called in, it's precipitated, it is condensed out of the energetic background of potential, and then just falls back into it again, all based on where your attention happens to be going. What we're doing in the non-dual inquiry is the attention, which is normally, and for most people all the time, focused outward, and we're turning it back towards ourselves, back through the realm of thought, which is very intimate, and feeling and sensation, going through all of those things to try to find the place where the actual cognition is happening, where seeing is actually taking place, where knowing is taking place, which is the point of consciousness. The awareness that is aware of all of these things, is aware of the thoughts, aware of moving through the thoughts more and more towards yourself. Now, there's a point at which attention, right, can't go any further, because when it's coming back to you, at some point, because you are in the place that's looking, you cannot turn around and look at yourself. And so now the way in which self-knowledge begins to emerge is coming completely from within. It is arising directly out of the self. It is not being pulled out of the environment by attention. It is being self-actualized, self-realized. It's a completely different criteria. The more that happens, the more it is going to take charge of attention. And the things you see will be very, very different. Because it's no longer, attention is no longer being directed or informed by the sense of a separate self. It is being informed by the self, the real self, what you are. So I always want to do the chop on the New Advaita talk. There's nobody here. There's nothing to do, and all of that, because it doesn't help. It makes a mess everywhere it goes, and it misses the point. It's partially true because what they're referring to is the separate self, but there's not nothing. Clearly, if there was nothing, I mean, nothing is nothing. None of this would be happening. You would not exist. Without awareness, you simply are not. The very fact that you even know of your own existence, which of course you do, and the exercise in the beginning was just to go back to that place, to try to make yourself more at home at the place where you simply know that you are, the simplicity of it. So does that help, my friend? Oh boy, questions are live. Do I need to speed up now? Okay. Hello from the East Coast. Hello, Liza. Ursula, hello from Madeira Island. Wonderful, wonderful. By all means, like and share while I'm looking through the questions here. Dave Scott from, hello. Namaste from Philly. Hello. Sarah. Hello, Sarah. Just got back from Italy last night. Venice was great, but this is better. Love the beard. It's getting a bit scraggly. That's my buddy Sarah in France. Daryl Sanders, hello from DCMD. Great to have you. Hi, G. Is the sense I am the field of perception? That's Carrie Brogan. Hello, Carrie. Let me try to continue to make this experiential. Start back at the simple sense of being. Do you exist? Right? Simple yes or no question, right? Nobody can answer no, because you'd have to exist to answer no. So the answer is yes, right? And you're aware of it, right? You're aware of that existence, right? Now, so there's something, it's very fundamental, it's imperceptible, it is simply a knowing, right? It's totally intuitive, which means you didn't draw the conclusion. It's self-evident. And this place here is the point of perception. Everything is perceived here, right? You don't go somewhere else to have a perception. This is where you are, right? So now, when you look at from here, you see that perceiving is an activity that is being perceived. It's very subtle, right? So it's very, very subtle. But stay with me on this. The point of actual perception is itself imperceivable, isn't it? You cannot turn around and look at yourself, right? The finger can't tap on itself, right? The scale cannot weigh itself. You cannot see yourself because you are yourself, and you're not an object that you can stand aloof from and look at. You are the ultimate place of perceiving. This is the absolute existence. Pure awareness. Your actual being. Now, from here, everything is perceived. There's all sorts of activity, form and color and light and variety and diversity. There's perceiving. There's what is perceived, right? What we're simply doing is breaking all of those things down, removing our attention off of all of the objects, however subtle, and just noticing that perceiving is happening is a very subtle observation, isn't it? but it's being perceived by the most subtle of all, which is being itself, pure awareness. My granddaughter is unhappy about it's nap time, and she's voicing I should have a little light outside on the air, right? It's very cute. Anyway, where'd it go? Oh, did I miss you? Oh, right. So, so now let's just start. This is you. The ultimate perceiver that cannot be perceived is you. Okay, and just look at it for a second. You can't go any further than that, right? There's not somebody else perceiving it. It is the place of perceiving. Okay, so that's the lens. You are behind it, and everything else is on the other side of it. Everything else appears to it, right? And over time, we begin to explore more and more about what that is appearing to it, because it's actually just itself known, as opposed to itself is pure awareness. But so when you talk about the field of perceiving, what you're talking about is awareness aware of being aware, right? And then that awareness is filled with 10,000 things, as it says in the Tao. That is, the entire universe appears to it, to this place of perceiving. So you could think of that as the field of perceiving is you. What is being perceived is appearing in you. It's appearing to you. And because this field of awareness is infinite, it's made of you. This is the essential oneness of all things. It is made of you. It is made of awareness. It is simply awareness doing what awareness does. Awaring. Right? There's no such word as awaring, but it's a better word. It would be a better word actually than awareness, because any time a word becomes a noun, there's a sense, the mind kind of tends to make it static. So we want to think of awareness as a thing. Awaring is probably a much better word, like knowing or perceiving. Right? Not an object that is aware, but awaring itself. I may start using that more because I kind of like it. So appearing in this field of awareness, known to awareness, is perceiving, and the sense of I am. The sense of I am appears to it. We know it appears to it because we're talking about it. Right? We can't talk about pure awareness. Not really. We can't describe it. Right? But the sense of I am, that's the firstborn of awareness. That's the universe. The sense I am is the universe. Whose sense of I am is it? Well, it's the sense of I am of awareness. But it is secondary to awareness, because there couldn't be a sense of I am if there wasn't something that existed prior to that sense of I am. So the sense I am is a very, very subtle thing that is being perceived and is appearing in the field of awareness. And that sense I am is a universal experience. Everything has it. You have that sense I am. I have the sense of I am. My granddaughter has the sense of I am. Dogs, cats, bugs, everything has the sense I am. Because it's the same sense I am. It's not a personal thing. It's not a little bit of the I am dropped in all the little places and we all get a chunk of it. It's the same I am, appearing in innumerable forms. Does that help you, Carrie? Did I get close or did I miss it? Popey says, hello GP, love you. Love you too, Popey. Diana, question. Sexual desire, physical attraction has a strong pull and is misleading me. How do I stop believing and falling for the experience of physical attraction? Well, clear seeing is always the ultimate answer. the sexual attraction is completely normal, right? We all like it, we all enjoy it. It's got a very important purpose in life. It serves all sorts of purposes on all sorts of different levels for it. It is a beautiful reflection of the essential unity of being made manifest as the male and female energies. So the question is, how does something that is completely natural to human beings, completely innocent, completely fun and enjoyable, how does that become misleading and confused? Well, something else has to emerge on the scene to misinterpret it and distort it out of its natural form. That something is the sense of a separate self. And that sense of a separate self manifests itself in the case of thinking that somehow this is going to be, that this particular person I'm attracted to is going to bring me something. If you look closely, you'll find that any kind of attachment to that, and it can be a substance. It can be, you can be attached to romance, right? Not even just sex, just to falling in love. You can be attached to that. You can be attached to shopping. You can, and any of those things. If you look, there's a feeling of lack, and then there's a sense that this is going to fill it up. And something like sexuality is very seductive, simply because it is very physically pleasurable, right? And so there is a a build, a climax, and a release, and there's this an emotional catharsis that takes place afterwards. So it gets the impression that it's giving you some kind of a that it's actually fulfilling the process. The problem is that it's short-lived, and oftentimes after that we feel we don't always feel really good about it, because we haven't had any genuine intimacy. We actually haven't connected with somebody. We have simply compensated for a sense of lack that's under the surface. The sense of lack is the sense of a separate self. The separate self doesn't know anything but lack. It cannot be happy. It can't. The nature of the separate self is unhappiness. That unhappiness, because of the way we've all been trained, looks externally, looks outside itself to find some kind of remedy for the emptiness in here. In the spiritual non-dual approach, we turn around and say, it's not there. If you could sum up 10,000 years of religious teaching, of genuine spiritual teaching, it would simply be, there's nothing out there for you to get. It will always be a disappointment. There's no way out. Relationships become utterly transformed when it becomes about giving instead of getting. When it becomes about mutual support, mutual exploration, forgiveness, open-heartedness, creating the kind of safe environment that if we'd had it as children, we would have a fraction of the problems that we've all been saddled with. A really awake, conscious relationship can create that environment that provides both people in it the space in which all of those childhood fears and traumas and wounds can be healed. The bomb can be brought out, and through that kind of mutual respect and mutual support. So the question always is what is it? What is it that you're hoping to get? So when you feel that desire, and a desire like sexuality is powerful because it is natural, right? It's not like this has been completely invented. We're supposed to feel that. We're supposed to feel that kind of a feeling. So it can get very confused when the separate self gets into the mix. Is what's actually my natural inclination here, and what is the separate self attached to turn it into an attachment, this projection onto a particular circumstance or a particular person or a particular event that's going to bring me happiness. That is the essential mistake. Nothing will. Even the happiness that it does deliver isn't actually coming from the fulfillment of the desire. That this is a big one to understand and to get it. When a desire is fulfilled, the fulfillment does not give you happiness. What happens is the desire dissolves. The desire, of course, being that internal pressure when the desire is absorbed by the separate self, the internal effort to get something. When that is fulfilled, that desire falls away. And what happens? Happiness, contentment. Because it's been there the whole time, but it's been obscured it's been blocked by an unfulfilled desire. And so it's kind of like, imagine you lived in a place, I live in Washington with a lot of gray days, right? So imagine you lived in a place that was overcast all the time. But every now and then, a little hole would open and blue sky would shine through. Now, you don't know. All you know is the gray sky. And all of a sudden, a little point of blue. Oh, isn't that wonderful? And then the clouds go back. Oh, I hope it comes back. What was that? Right? Because you don't know any better. Let's say it happens periodically, and some adventuring anthropologist or something wants to find out what is that thing that's appearing in the sky, and he goes up, right as it opening, goes through it, and all of a sudden, nothing but blue. That was the reality. That little opening of the clouds is when desire is satisfied. But because of our ignorance, we think that the event or the person satisfied that desire. Desire rises again. The clouds close back up, and it looks like the sky is gone. It looks like happiness comes and goes. Right? Contentment comes and goes. It doesn't. That which blocks it comes and goes. Now, as you begin to see that, you'll make less and less blocks. You'll feel less and less dependent on those. Your attention will be more turned towards the actual sky in which the clouds are appearing. You realize that the sky is the reality, and that the attachment to various desires is what's coming and going, and that the happiness that seems transient is only transient because it's being blocked. In fact, it isn't transient. It is the ground of being. Sat Chit Ananda. That is the Sanskrit words for being, for existence. Sat is being, Chit is consciousness, and Ananda is bliss, happiness, peace, stillness, contentment. Those are the aspects of being. Being, but if you were and didn't know it, what in the world would it mean? It would mean nothing. So consciousness is being. You exist as consciousness, and the nature of that consciousness is happiness, is joy. Not necessarily the ecstatic happiness. That's really pleasure. That's a better way of looking at it, but happiness gets used in those terms. So contentment, right? Peace. This background. The nature of being is contentment. And whenever you're not feeling content, you can tell that on a subtle level, you have identified with the separate self. Just turn back in and ask, well, where have I begun identified? Where have I projected my happiness on an external object? And you'll very quickly get to the heart of it and find that it'll begin to disappear. Desire doesn't disappear, but attachment to desire does, which means desire can come and go without creating any problems, creating any suffering, and it will come and go in a field of wisdom where you'll know exactly when to indulge that desire and when not to. And you'll also get in touch with the deeper desires. The real thing we all seek in sexual union is the intimacy. All desire is actually the way in which it appears in manifestation of the essential desire, which is the desire of you for yourself. The desire of consciousness, the sense of I am, to return back to its source. That's the actual nature of desire. All desire is really for that. And then you find that the universe supports you in that. Once you know where to look and the direction to go, which is also not the right way to put it, because you can't, it's like saying, get up and walk over to yourself. You're already there. But in belief, we don't think we are. And so that belief needs to be corrected with the right understanding, the right insight. So, does that answer it for you, Diana? That will help you not fall for the experience of physical attraction. Or if you do, it'll be conscious, and you won't put as much stock into it. You'll actually get in touch with what you're really, really desiring, which is first yourself, and then second, to know yourself as you really are, and then secondarily to express that in the world. Because it isn't, I know who I am now, I'm isolated, I'm up on the top of the mountain. Not at all. You express that in intimacy, but it's no longer going to experience to get something. The experience is now the vehicle of the expression of your inherent happiness and love and compassion and wisdom. How's that? Jay, Pelagie, I changed my profile pic and shortened my first name. Hey Jay. Jay Devan. John Watson, hi GP from Glasgow. How do you know the qualities of the emptiness you mentioned? Do you know the qualities of the emptiness you mentioned at the end of the meditation? How do you know those qualities? Well, let me see if I can properly discern what your question is here. Remember, the emptiness is not empty, right? The word in Sanskrit is shunyata, which means a pregnant emptiness. We're talking about the infinite potential of being unmanifested. That's you. That is the you that can take any form whatsoever. The perfume of that, which we know is the perfume of it because it is perceived by it, and the ultimate perceiver, the absolute perceiver, which is you, cannot be perceived. So everything that can be perceived is an emanation of it, like the sunlight in the sun, right? And so that sense of love, of compassion, of boundlessness, of deathlessness. How do you know? The way to truly let that sink in is to explore it for yourself. Really look. And you'll notice when you do that you will run up against all the beliefs that say, no, that's not. No, how could it be? No, you're going to die. It's going to end. It's going to stop. Of course, there's a boundary. It stops right here. Yeah, maybe you can sense a few things on the outside. But if you actually look at those and go, okay, well, those are beliefs. I'm going to put those to the test. I'm going to see if they're really true. And I'm going to look and see if I can find a boundary to just the sense of being. Now, what I would do then is when a boundary would appear, I would find some kind of a boundary. Let's say it's my head, the idea that I'm a consciousness compressed inside this skull. Okay, I get that. And there's a certain feeling about that. But when I look closely, I find that all of that construct of this being bound is an image in my mind being perceived by this. Is this really limiting what awareness can be aware of? Now, when I say boundless, I don't mean space, okay? I don't mean it's like infinite space, like I should be able to close my eyes and I should be able to feel things going on Mars or Alpha Centauri. It's not like that. Is there some place awareness can't go? Something that it cannot be aware of. And if awareness is awareness, by definition, anything It is the defining thing as to what can be aware of what you can be awareing. Is there any boundary to that? Have you ever experienced a boundary to that? So when you really begin to explore it, and again, this is just one way of doing it, just looking at the emptiness of pure potential. Is there a limit of potential? Is there only so many things that can happen? Right? They say there is in the Big Bang, this universe, this is the particular way it happened, but it could have banged in another way. When you're looking at pure potential of what could be, is there a boundary? There's no boundary to being. Now, to just connect the sense of I with that being, because who is it that's aware if it's not you? Of course it's you, which means the infinite boundlessness of awareness is your infinite boundlessness, unless you think of the me as this finite, separate, limited self. Now I'm thinking of myself in those terms, and I'm trying to break down the boundaries that this has. It's a waste of time. The boundaries are it. What's looking at the boundaries? Are the boundaries themselves not appearing in something bigger than that? And you just walk up to any boundary you make. It expands a little bit more. Oh, it's about, oh, what's on the other side of that? Oh, wow, look, it's bigger. See if it ends. Now, this is a direct experience. This is not theoretical. In order for you to be convinced, you have to look for yourself, and then you have to trust your own insight and experience over what everybody's been telling you for all these years. You have to trust what you are experiencing more than the beliefs about it. And this is the real challenge, because we have been indoctrinated, enculturated, programmed to see the world through the lens of these beliefs. And the whole non-dual inquiry is nothing more than the challenging of those beliefs to see if they're really true. Is the earth really flat? Is the sun really going around the earth? Sure looks that way. I guess it is. Well, why don't we find out? I get a real kick out of it. Every now and then I see somebody one of these flat earth things saying, and I'm going, okay, this is really easy, folks. Get in an airplane, fly in one direction, and see if you come to the end. Why are we even having this discussion? If you're not convinced, go find out. Go take the plane, unless it's a conspiracy to make it look like. I mean, explore for yourself. Look, and keep looking, and challenge every single thing, including what I'm telling you. In Buddhism, they call it the great doubt. Doubt it all, right? Don't take anything for granted, but look for yourself. But the key to this being a successful exploration is being willing to, having the courage, really, to stand by what you come to see yourself and not be intimidated by what the rest of the world says, which will say, this is nonsense. It's all matter. You're just a blob of matter that when this deteriorates, you're gone, oblivion, right? There was eternity, a little blurb in time where you were here and had consciousness, and you're gone for eternity. Boom, that's it. That's what you get. That's the hand you're dealt. Instinctively, I knew that was nonsense. I can feel it, right? Can't you? It's just, something's wrong with it. I can't even envision at all not existing. I mean, really not existing at all. Total oblivion. The best I can do is this image of nothingness, but I'm sitting still there watching it. So the non-dual path, the path of non-dual inquiry, is this is Vedanta. This is you just don't leave any stone unturned. You do not accept anything on face value. You put it to the test for yourself. You see if it matches your experience. And what you'll find is that what you are actually experiencing is unbounded. But that the wall, the boundaries have all been in the mind, and they're imaginary. They're not real. But if I believe them to be real, I will experience them as if they are. I will create my own little boundary, Like they train elephants when they're young. They'll take a stake and pound it in the ground, put a chain on their leg, right? So that they can only walk so far. Well, they're like this, every day this is done to them. By the time they're adults, they could effortlessly pull that stake out, but they don't. They have been conditioned, the walls of their mind now, so that they don't even question that there's something outside of those walls. Well, the non-dual teacher comes along and says, question it. Is there really a boundary? If there is, okay. But if there isn't, well, it's a pretty momentous discovery, isn't it? Does that help you, John? Oh, another John Orphew. Mindfulness-based therapists can be very helpful, I think, is a good bridge. Yes. And the beautiful thing, because I have a lot of friends, lots of them these days, yeah. I have lots of friends and the like, are therapists and that sort of thing. And it's all the time now. It's complete. That industry has been completely transformed. There was somebody at my meetup, somebody who comes regularly to my meetups. This lovely lady who is a therapist, and she said, I just say whatever's coming to mind now. I mean, it's no real formula. It's none of that. It's just very spontaneous and present, and just really being present with somebody. She says, I just get amazed at some of the things that come out of my mouth. But this is happening more and more and more because consciousness is awakening. Consciousness is awakening, and consciousness awakening manifests itself as apparently awakening individuals. So you and I discussing this is a manifestation of consciousness, the infinite consciousness awakening to its own infinitude. We are the symptom of it. We are the recipient of it, as well as those who are precipitating it. The moment it happens to you, it ends up start happening through you, right? But nobody wakes up of their own accord because consciousness wakes up from the dream of being that person. GP doesn't wake up. He couldn't. We woke up from GP, from that illusion. Lena, hello, Lena. Hi from Finland. Hello, my first time live. Thank you for your amazing work. Wonderful to have you. Finland, wow. I think you may be my first person from Finland. Boy, oh boy, I love this. I love it. David and Elaine, hey, my good friends. Hi, GP and all. Greetings from Southeast England. We won't be here for the next 3 satsangs. As off to India. Oh, wow. And visiting Turvamal, I can never pronounce that now. Turavamal, never mind. And Rama Maharshi's ashram. Be with you in spirit. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Take up that atmosphere. He's still there. I don't think he went anywhere. The body's not there, but that energy signature is very much still there. I recommend that when you go into the hall where he held his satsangs and where he would used to sit, that you just sit there very quietly. Remember, he was known as the silent sage because most of the time he didn't talk. I mean, he would talk with people, but he thought that the highest satsang was silence. So that energy pattern of silence, that pregnant silence, that full silence, that powerful silence is still there. So I highly recommend that that the two of you sit down for a while and just quietly meditate in the presence of that alive silence. I think it really be quite meaningful for you. John Orfew, you're from New York City. Whereabouts in New York City? I lived there twice. Once in Manhattan and in Brooklyn and then in Queens. Merle Port. Hi, GP, and I'm from the call around this beautiful planet. Hi, Merrill. Great advice, GP. Thank you. Ah, wonderful. Good, good, good. Ducks. Yo, ducks. Hey, GP. When I observe thoughts and feelings for what they are, without attaching to them special meaning, there's a feeling of deep satisfaction. Is that also illusory in nature? No. This is another symptom of the again, the Neo-Advaita stuff, that all experiences is illusory. So, an experience of misery and an experience of joy get equated as if they're the same thing. On a certain level, they are both energetic patterns. But which one points towards the reality of your being and which one points towards the separate self, right? So when you are withdrawing your attention from thoughts and feelings, not giving them special meaning, just removing from them all the story, of course the sense of satisfaction is going to arise, because the sense of satisfaction is what the self feels like. It is not an illusion. The illusion would be that, because I did X, Y, and Z, I feel satisfied. That's the illusion. Satisfaction is always the presence of that contentment of the self. And when the obstructions to that are cleared away, that's what you feel. Now, of course, it is secondary because it is something that you are experiencing, but what you are experiencing is your very own nature. Whereas the experience of suffering or misery is always thoughts and feelings that are referencing back to the separate sense of separate self. This is really, really important. The illusion is only the sense of a separate self. Without that sense of a separate self, life becomes loving, contented, full of creativity, full of joy, without any dependence on it, without any projecting of all of those qualities that belong to consciousness onto objects. That's the illusion, right? So, I mean, what better way to know that you're on the right track, but to feel content, to feel satisfied? I mean, if that was equally an illusion, what guidance would we have at all for knowing what was good, what was bad, what was right and wrong, what was truth and what was false? The very fact that it feels bad is an indication that its origin is the belief in a separate self, because the true self doesn't feel bad. Right? So you can tell. Take any thought, feeling, or anything, any experience, and trace it back to its origin. Is its origin in the sense of the true sense of self? It is a manifestation of that, or is it bubbling up from the false sense of the sense of self? Christ put it beautifully. He said the same fountain can't send forth at the same place both sweet water and bitter. So you can tell if it's bitter, you withdraw more, go back more in it, find the origin of that bitter water, find the fountain out of which it is coming, because it's not the same fountain. It can't be. It's a different one. And so that water fountain is the sense of a separate self, which will always create dissatisfaction and attachment and pain and suffering and disappointment, and then the moments of actual bliss. When all of that just collapses for a second and you feel like what you really feel, and there's this happiness, the separate self says, oh, right, it worked. I got it that time. I just have to do this some more. Not knowing that the clouds just parted for a second. Right, right. You didn't create blue sky. The clouds just parted and it was there. Oh, right. But the ignorance of it, the illusion, is thinking that somehow that possesses this quality. This is the fragrance. This love, compassion, satisfaction, joy, harmony, creativity, engagement, intimacy. These are the perfume of the spirit. And you can smell the perfume, you just won't be able to find the flower. Because you are the flower. Does that help you, ducks? Very, very important. Because there are a lot of non-dual spiritual teachers out there which would have said yes. That is the case. A lot would say that. And they're wrong. If I may be so blunt, they're wrong. Hey, GP, is there any meditation to balance chemicals in the brain? I lack serotonin. I'm not 100% sure. There are some things, I've heard like in the binaural beats and solfeggio frequencies, different kinds of sound that may have some effect on that. Of course, there's supplements you can get. Watch your diet. Take a look at your diet, what you're eating. Very practical ways in which you can address this. Like I said before, we live in a rather toxic environment, so paying attention to the quality of the food you eat and lots of veggies. I just had a big green drink before I started satsang. And then as far as meditation is concerned, what I would do specifically, I would approach it more like inner reconciliation approaches it, which is, okay, there's an energetic dysfunction going on in the system and you're aware of what it is. I would give it loving attention. First off, don't see it as a problem that has to be fixed. See it as this energy system that for whatever reason put itself into a particular pattern that caused this deficiency. And it's holding that pattern because it thinks there's a reason for it. It's something it's reacting to in the environment. And it could be, food, it could be experience, or it could just be a deep sense of not feeling safe. There could be a million reasons. We don't have to analyze it. What you do is simply talk to it. I also could recommend some energy tapping, meridian tapping, EFT, which also helps. Again, it's always, though, about not trying to fix anything, but to create a safe space in which the system can make its transition into the place of safety. And most times, it will correct itself. It may need some extra help, a supplement or something like that, or maybe a particular kind of exercise program or yoga or something like that. I don't really know. It's not my field of expertise. And of course, it's kind of hard to sort through because everybody's an expert on it now. Go on to Facebook, you get a million opinions, or on YouTube on the stuff. But I would start, first off, letting go of the sense that it's a problem. Realizing that there's an energetic pattern there in the system, and that energetic pattern is being held in place by some kind of a belief, an assumption, a sense of an absence of safety. So give that energy all the loving support and encouragement, and create an inner environment of safety, which means you stop trying to get rid of it and you start becoming curious about it. Why are you here? How can I help you? Obviously, something's off. what do you need in order to make it right? The problem with a lot of our modern approach is that our minds the egoic mind is so arrogant. It thinks, well, I know what to do, and it's just going to go in and start mucking with stuff. It never actually talks to the energy itself. I talk to the energy. I talk to the energy, the various parts of my body, the various feelings and stuff, the way I talk to another person, because they're no less real and alive than having a conversation with the person next door. Now that's not a strictly non-dual perspective. It's more one that I take just for getting somebody to the point where you get out of the conflict with your body, get out of the idea that somehow you know better than it does, and harmonize that relationship so that the natural wisdom of the functioning of the universe, which is consciousness made manifest, can reveal itself to you, consciousness. Because it is consciousness, your consciousness, two forms of the same substance. You want to find the point of unity, the point where you come together. And it's only the sense of a separate self, the false idea that this energy, this is a body here and there's me here, that it's not this whole unified wholeness within consciousness that makes it feel as if there's something there that needs to be fixed or challenged. It isn't. It's just another aspect of you. It's another aspect of consciousness. The body is simply consciousness. That's all it is. And so as consciousness, there's an intelligence in it. And the more you become curious, the more you reunite with it, the more you find that it's actually you, right? That there's nothing here but you. You have no enemies. It's all you. There's nothing you need to fix. That everything simply conforms itself to the environment in which it's in. So there's no need to pay attention to the actual form that it's taking. Step back and look at the environment that it's conforming itself to. Right? So you don't have to fix that, you fix the environment. You move it to a greater sense of expansiveness and safety. And that's all you. That's all an internal effort on your part to become more safe for yourself, more allowing, more open and spacious, which is, of course, the nature of awareness, isn't it? Pure awareness is pure compassion. It says no to nothing. It says yes to everything. Everything is welcome in pure awareness. That's the great heart of it. That's love, right? That's why awareness is not cold. It's love, because it's completely open. It's the goddess energy. It's the mysterious mother of the universe. Does that help you there, Robert? Paris set me free, Paris. Hi, GP. Sab in Paris. I've been watching some Jim Newman and Tony Parsons, hardcore non-dual talk. It's amazing stuff, but there's not much humanity in there. But if there's nothing, or there's only this, and the message, as they say, is utterly bleak and offers no hope, and if they're actually right, what's the point of being human? There wouldn't be. There wouldn't be, and I don't like to name names, but those are the Neo-Advaitists that I completely disagree with. And me and my ilk is like Adyashanti and Rupert Spira and Muji and Francis Lucille and some others as well. I just don't go along with it. I think it does more damage than it does good. And there's also a certain amount of arrogance in it. Why would anyone seek a path where there's no hope and there's no point in being human? That's misery. I mean, it's totally nonsensical, right? And of course, that can't be the case. Anybody who teaches that and thinks that way must be drawing some satisfaction from that. I'm sorry, they're not inflicting misery on themselves. They can't be, right? So they're gonna, there's a certain pleasure that's being taken in that, and I've listened to them, and what they say is true to a certain extent, but they're stuck in the absolute. uh, in Zen Buddhism, there's a little known teaching called Tozan's ranks, and it's a map of the road to spirituality, to complete and total liberation. And it starts with ignorance, and there's some kind of an experience where somebody's on the path. And they can be on the path for a while, right? Until finally, at some point, the stars align, things converge, and they have the great awakening that I am everything. There's nothing other than me. This kind of talk. And I've talked to a couple of Zen masters who said, I got stuck there for a long. They didn't even know that there was more. That's step 3 of 5 in Tozan's ranks. The next step is what Genpo Roshi, a Zen master, called the fall. Well, if I am everything and there's nothing but me, then all suffering is my suffering. Whoop, whoo, right down that mountain. You have to completely ignore the suffering of humanity, write it off, dismiss it, in order to take that position. That's the difference between the Hinayana path, or the path of the Arhat, and the Mahayana path, the great vehicle. The Hinayana means the lesser vehicle. The great vehicle, which is the direction that the Buddha clearly specified is the way for the true seekers, that the Arhats never get there. And that is the embracing of the human. And at the bottom of that spiral, it comes down when you completely open, the heart of reality opens up. And you become a figure like Christ, willing to give their life to alleviate the suffering of others. I mean, that's the ultimate image, symbol for that. The ultimate achievement in Zen is the ordinary human being. To be the ordinary human being and totally accept it. Surrender to it completely. This. Just like this. That's what somebody mentioned mindfulness before. That's what mindfulness is. Being in life as it actually is. That's, when they say you're doing a mindfulness meditation while you're doing the dishes or cooking rice. Why? Because that's life. We have to do dishes. Why? Because they're dirty. Oh, okay. And you clean the dishes. That's it. That's a koan. Why do you do it? Because it has to be done. That's the acceptance, and that's where the real bliss is. That's the path of the Bodhisattva. That's the Mahayana path. That's the great vehicle. That's where real joy is. It's very easy to get stuck on top of that mountain and not want to come down. You can only get stuck there for so long, because eventually consciousness will kick your ass down the mountain. Right? I mean, if you don't go willingly, you'll find yourself tumbling down and have a crash. And I've been stuck there, right? You can, but the separate self is a clever. There's a reason why the ego is pictured as the devil. Very clever, very seductive. It doesn't matter where you get. There's always an opportunity to go back to sleep again. You can go back to sleep in the absolute. Eventually, what happens is the suffering breaks through that hardness. It just breaks through it, and the heart opens, and you feel the pain. That's life. Buddha didn't deny that. He said there is suffering, right? There's a cause. There's an end to it, and there's a way to end it. But he didn't start saying suffering isn't real. No, there is suffering. It was his witnessing of suffering, old age and death and all these things happening that he didn't see much of before that set him on the path to become the Buddha. It wasn't so that he could say there's nobody here and there's nothing to do. He was out to find the answer to suffering. And after his own time as ascetic out in the forest, when he finally sat down under the Bodhi tree, the place where he said, I am not moving from this place until I have found the cure to suffering. So all I can say is that that's the Neo-Advaita teaching, and I find it an incomplete path, and I'm not alone in my feeling about that. Yeah. I think it's done some people some good. I think in some ways it's very useful because people aren't really very good at thinking these days. We haven't really been taught to be really precise in our thinking, and so it does have that advantage. But it stops there, and you can't. We're human. We have consciousness is having human experience, right? This is consciousness, right? You can't separate. This is it. This is it. This, sneezing, all those noises we don't like that our bodies make, getting a cold. This is life. This is the meditation, right? The acceptance of this is the actual hero's journey. This is the place we have to get to. A total surrender to what is. That's the path. Thanks for asking that question, Paris. Saab, that's really wonderful. John Orfew. Did I pronounce that right? Orfew or Orfew? Hey, GP, recently found you through a former student of Brent Smith, who said you used to talk about in old videos. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, from the days when I ran the men's group. He talks a lot about attracting what you want to create manifestation, but from a non-attached, indifferent, equanimous place, more or less. One thing he's big on is a belief of deserving things as a baseline, but in a healthy way. Question here. Isn't it better to believe we deserve these things than not to deserve them? Or is that just a waste of time, sort of like city powers you talked about last week? Also, I've seen you talk about how all beliefs are limiting. I do agree with that. So should we even cultivate to have these beliefs around healthy deserving? Sorry for the length. No problem. It's actually a beautiful portal. It's a beautiful door to open and look at it. The perspective, if I was just talking to a bunch of people, and it's not non-dual, we're not having a spiritual conversation about it, right? We're just talking about the psychology of it and emotional stuff, and how do I lead a better life and that sort of thing. Well, obviously feeling good about yourself is better than feeling bad about yourself, right? So the law of attraction stuff, it says choose the better feeling thought. Well, duh, right? Right? Of course, that's exactly what you'd want to do. You'd want to choose the thoughts that gravitate towards better feelings, and choose the better feelings that generate better thoughts. What we find, which is why I created Inner Reconciliation, is oftentimes there's an enormous amount of resistance to gravitating towards more positive thoughts, having better feelings about yourself. At which point, it doesn't do any good to try to force it to happen. Visualize, till your head explodes. It's better to stop and take a look at what the energy is that's resistant to that. Now that's self-affirming, isn't it? I'm not going to try to force myself into having good thoughts. I'm going to honor myself by turning towards the discomfort and the energy inside of me that doesn't want to have those good thoughts. I go, wow, that's weird. Why would anything not want to have the better thoughts? Why is this resistance even here? That's a very compassionate way of looking at it, rather than just trying to get rid of it, which is what a lot of the New Age and law of attraction teachers kind of do. It's really kind of force feeding it happiness, right? So from that perspective, yes, do affirmations and the like. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Again, you'll find there's a certain sense of resistance. So you wanna then we just use that not as an obstacle for me getting what I want, like somehow I've got to get rid of it, because now you've got a bigger conflict going on. So now you've got this schism inside of you, and now that's definitely not the energy for attracting. So you have no choice but to honestly look at where this resistance is coming from. Now it'll come from childhood issues, beliefs, all sorts of things. When you then take a deeper step, into the realm of the spiritual, of the non-dual. We're no longer just concerned with trying to have a better internal state to get better results outside. Our concern becomes deeper now, existential. Who am I? I want to answer that question, not just have a better human life, nothing wrong with that, but not just that, right? Just have a good job, do some things, maybe have a family you like, and then die. Really, that's it? There's a point at which you go, no, there's all of that's wonderful. All of that's great, but there's got to be more to this, right? And you start digging deeper, and eventually you come across non-dual teachers, and you start really examining this stuff in depth, and so it just comes at another level. The teaching about being indifferent and equanimous about things, that's kind of a psychological way of talking about the attachment. You're simply not projecting your happiness onto some circumstance, because then you're in the job of trying to control the circumstance, which is a creator of conflict. So you recognize a desire is there, but you don't get so attached to it. You let it have its own life. And anytime a desire comes up, it's going to create a certain kind of reaction within your nervous system. That's the opportunity for you as a spiritual inquirer to look at the reaction that's coming to that, because that's the material that needs to be cleared out in order to have the biggest sense of who you are. Now, here's a beautiful thing. You can get to the point where there's a lot of energy cleared out, and you are able to visualize stuff, and you can actually make some manifestations. But you have not yet really discerned the who is having the manifestations. Who does the desire belong to? Whose desire is this? Now, if I am unconsciously, and for most people it isn't conscious, they don't realize that the identification with the separate self is an identification with an imaginary critter, that it isn't who they are. And so from that perspective, from that fountain sending forth its waters that are perpetually unsatisfying, it's manifesting, it is trying to manifest. So a statement like, let's make a general one. I naturally have success, abundance, prosperity, and love. It's a general, kind of affirmation somebody has. Now, the separate self, that's never true. It's never true. It doesn't have any of that. It is perpetually miserable. It is forever seeking. It's always trying to get something. It never knows that kind of satisfaction. So if that same affirmation was voiced by the true self, I am the very source. I am an experience of all abundance and love, prosperity, creativity. It's always true for the self. The affirmation is always true. Who's making the affirmation? That's the difference. It's not what is said, it's who's saying it. Is that clear? Anything that is affirmed by the separate self will, even if it is the most wonderful, most beautiful, most perfectly crafted affirmation, and it's held to with all your heart, all it can possibly do is manifest more of the separate self. But if it is identified with that a statement like that is something that God could say easily, then all of a sudden the resistance can begin to fall away, because there's no resistance to the infinite being talking about the full potential of infinite being. Right? Where is it coming from? Who's making the affirmation? And all those kinds of teachings about equanimity, and detachment and all that is just to get you to that point. right? Because again, the separate self isn't equanimous. The separate self is not content. It is it is not willing to sit back. It is not indifferent. It is not unattached. It can't be. People make the mistake of thinking that somehow they are this separate self, but I'm going to perfect it now. That was the amazing insight of the Buddha when he realized that that's the real cause of suffering was the belief in the sufferer. It wasn't the circumstances. It was the belief in the sufferer. You want to alleviate suffering? Eliminate the sufferer. I think I'll let it go with that. How's that, John? No need to apologize for the length. What are we doing on time? 1:02. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're good. Dave and Elaine, finding it so poignant through these satsangs to bring awareness to the subtle discrimination the mind can make between consciousness and that which arises within it, and realizing it's all one thing. Wow. Yes. That is kind of that's the final piece of the puzzle. First, we have to do the neti-neti, where consciousness is seen clearly in sharp relief from all of the things that are the content of consciousness, that which it's conscious of. And we have to do that so we eliminate the identification with form. So consciousness is just pure formless awareness. Right? Now at that point, because that's the top of the mountain, right? Now at that point, we turn around and we start coming back down the mountain. We start going out to experience. And we start bringing experience in and go, well, what is this I'm actually experiencing? And you find that what you are experiencing is consciousness, that there's nothing else but consciousness. So it's not that there's consciousness and an object that exists independently, and I've broken my identification with it now, so now I'm free. There is no object independent of consciousness. The knowing of the object and the existence of the object are one and the same. Like I said, at the very beginning, when I was talking about attention, when fellows questioned about attention, it was like this neutral background, and the attention brought something out in relief. But that thing is being created by attention. It doesn't exist separate from it. Attention is making it. So it is made of attention. It is not that attention is the object doesn't exist. It is brought forth by attention. So what is it? It's made of attention. That is attention. Attention is not just seeing something that you didn't see before. It's literally bringing it into existence. Ekstastare, making it stand out. So it is the attention. So everything you're experiencing is consciousness. That's all there is. That's what it's made out of. You have a thought. The thought doesn't exist somewhere and then hop in and then hop out again, right? It appears spontaneously. Well, if it appears spontaneously in consciousness, what's it made of? What's the substance of it? Consciousness. Right now, picture an elephant in your mind. Picture an elephant in your mind. What's that elephant made of? Mind. That's all it's made of. And when we realize that there is no material universe, everything is consciousness, you'll see that that's all that's being experienced. All there is the self, consciousness, the one being in which every thing exists. And that's even an inaccurate thing to say, that no thing actually exists. Right? Forms are simply consciousness precipitated, condensed. It's like there's no difference between red light and blue light and the pure white light that can't be seen. It's They are exactly the same substance. And you find that that which is seeing, experiencing, knowing, perceiving, is what it's being perceived, known, and experienced. They are not two. Foop. It is just one. Paul Joseph says, so there is just I am. Is it a sense of existence? The ultimate absolute is prior to even any sense of existence. But the nature of it gives rise to the sense of existence. The most subtle, the universe springs at the moment the self-recognition of awareness happens, which is perpetual. It's all the time. So the universe is forever coming into existence and going out of existence. It's Brahma on the lotus blinking. And the universe comes into existence and goes out of existence. What I invite you to do is to simply explore it. If I can perceive it, it's on the other side of the lens. I don't care how subtle it is, right? But the reality that I am perceiving it is self-evident. So whatever that is, and in fact, you can't really name it. It is beyond all categories of thought and language. You cannot name it. The moment you name it, you've taken one step away from it, the sense of being, right? That's the doorway into the absolute. The sense of being is perceived. And you know you're here because perceiving is happening, but you cannot perceive yourself. You are totally beyond. You are beyond everything. Does that make sense for you, Paul? Ferry says, wonderful, thank you. Good. Paul Joseph, sorry, meant there is, didn't see it. There is but or just one I am. So it's not personal, but refers to a universal sense of existence, permanence of being. Absolutely. Yes, it's not personal. We all at the beginning and did the little exercise. We all went and got in touch with that simple sense of being. We were all in touch with the same simple sense of being. What I was feeling, what you were feeling, and what everybody else was feeling, exactly the same. Right? It's like we're all in the same space, aren't we? When you take the objects away, we're all in the same space, aren't we? We're all in the same consciousness, I guess you could put it that way. No, we all are the same consciousness. One consciousness is not personal. You can find that. Just go back to that sense of presence, that sense of being, prior to any conditioning whatsoever, any kind of mixing it up with anything. No name, no form, no gender, no beliefs, no nothing. Just the pure sense of being. And then notice that pure sense of being, however subtle it is perceived by something. And then notice, and in that place, is that like a personal possession? Is there a boundary to it? If you can't find a boundary, then it must be everywhere. Then it is everything. And in fact, it's even beyond everywhere because it's not localized in space. Space and time arise out of it. So it doesn't have a location. You can't even call it infinite. It is beyond all categories. It is the totally transcendent. Thank you for that. Jay, thoughts are always not completely satisfying, where awareness is infinitely satisfying. Amen. Yes. Then they're never completely satisfied because they're constantly changing. There could be a moment I'll have an insight into something or some creative thing that I came with or some musical idea or something, very satisfying, right? And then it passes, right? When I used to play music a lot, when I was writing a new piece of music, I'd get this inspiration. Oh man, I would just be at it for hours. I'd cry. It was wonderful. I was just having this incredible experience. By the time I learned to play it well enough that I could perform it in public, I hated it. God, no, I don't want to practice it again. But you had to get it good enough. Then, performing it in public, I get to hear it through their ears. And so now it becomes, it takes on meaning again. It becomes fun again. Because the people are reacting to the playing of it, and all of a sudden now there's a dialogue going on. Whereas before, just by myself, oh God, please don't make me play that again. Sophia, hi Sophia. Catherine retracted her message. John M. Yep. Did I miss something up there, John? Did I miss something on you? Let me see if I missed something. Because it looks like you picked up where something left off. But I don't see it. So, all right, if I missed it, I'm sorry. Johnny M. Yet we are glued to a body-mind talking to another mind with thinking going on, and no one knows how thought happens. God is a tricky son of a gun. Yes, indeed. There's a that famous quote from Albert Einstein. He said, God doesn't play dice with the universe. And Stephen Hawking came along and says, not only does he play dice with the universe, he throws them where you cannot see them. You are not glued to a body-mind. That is a belief. These exercises we do where we just get in touch with that sense of being. That sense of being is not glued to a body-mind. The body-mind appears in it. And we have beliefs about the body-mind that make it seem very solid and real and undeniable, and there's nothing we can do, we're stuck with it. Those are beliefs. There's no more substance to that than any other thought that could come and go. But when we believe them, which is also another one of our powers of creation, the moment I believe something, it hangs around and begins to collect other thoughts like it around that. And so we get this idea that, spiritual awakening is really hard. I'm stuck in this body mind. I can't get rid of it. Stop. Who's speaking? Is pure awareness saying, God, I'm stuck in the body mind. I can't get rid of it. This is really torture. Or is the separate self saying that? Which fountain are you drinking from? It's not true. None of that you outlined there is actually true. Except no one knows how thought happens. It's a spontaneous arising of consciousness. Thought is consciousness manifest. That's what it is. It's very simple. It's very simple. Thought is nothing but consciousness made manifest. Consciousness manifested is thought, perception, emotion, and sensation. That's how consciousness experiences. And based on the attention, that experience molds itself into all sorts of different shapes and forms, infinite shapes and forms, just like 7 notes in a scale can create, look at the amount of music it creates. Well, 12 notes in a scale. Look at the amount of music it creates. Infinite, and there's absolutely no limit to it, is there? Right. So the basic recipe, the basic ingredients here of manifest consciousness make the entirety of existence, make the entire of experience. Who's having the experience? Awareness. Consciousness is having the experience. There's not, we get kind of abstract and we think we're talking about consciousness as if it's this thing. It's you. We're talking about you, right? You're what's conscious, right? You are the consciousness. You're not the person. You are the consciousness. So what knows consciousness? What could be conscious of consciousness? Consciousness. What could be aware of awareness? Awareness. So this infinite awareness, there's only one awareness. The awareness is speaking to you now and is hearing me, you now. Right? That's all there is. Awareness aware of itself. No one finds him but himself. There's not 2 awarenesses out there, is there? So if you're awareness, you are the awareness. Is that clear? It's about as deep as we can go, folks. Um, John Jay says, John M., but there's awareness of all that. Ah, yes, awareness, but so what? Well, one would say, so what? Only if the search for spiritual reality is to serve a more human, mundane purpose. I can awaken, then I won't feel as sad, I won't feel as pained, I won't feel the loss. And there's a lot of emphasis on that in the Neo-Advaita track. You get to this place where you just don't feel anymore. The so what is the end of suffering. Really, the end of suffering. And if you haven't experienced that, there's mixed motivation, right? There's a wanting to alleviate suffering by the fixing of condition, changing conditions, right? Which is what the separate self does to the egoic mind. That's what it does. It always attributes pleasure and pain, suffering and happiness to circumstances. And therefore it's forever manipulating circumstances to get rid of the pain and to have more pleasure. So don't mix those up. The non-dual inquiry goes through all of those layers in order to get to the essence of all suffering, which is believing yourself to be somebody you're not. If you believe yourself somebody you're not, you're walking through the world as if you're that person. Of course, suffering's going to happen because it's going to be very confusing. Because the truth is not going to confirm that you are not that person. So when we talk about this pure awareness, what we're doing is just getting to the essence of who you are. And when you know who you are, you experience happiness. Because you don't start reaching for happiness somewhere else anymore, which is the cause of suffering. And we keep doing it simply because we have become convinced that we don't have it and it must be out there somewhere. And the best we can hope for then is good coping skills and a little bit of pleasure every now and then in the midst of, just in the midst of everyday monotony. It's even, it was Sigmund Freud who said that the psychoanalysis help the person exchange intense suffering for everyday misery. not a very happy diagnosis. So knowing awareness is not a discovery that you make. Awareness is a realization that that's what you are, and that changes things. Because if I'm awareness, if I'm really boundless consciousness, my interaction with the world, it's not that I'm withdrawn now. I'm just interacting in the world as that. I'm embodying that. Everything I do, whether it be going to the grocery store or making dinner, doing dishes, or giving a satsang, right? It's that. It's awareness is in action, and awareness or consciousness in action is what we experience as manifest form, as people and places and things and the like. But you see the essential transcendent unity in it. It doesn't exist independently of that. So the source of it is the constant generator of it. To know that that is who you are is to step outside, completely out of the egoic mind, which is the source of all suffering. It is the source of all suffering, and it is the only sufferer. As Muji puts it, your sense of the image you're holding of yourself is suffering from the images that it is holding about itself. You, awareness, never suffers. Suffering and the sufferer are one. You want to be free of suffering? Become free of the sufferer. See through the illusion of the sufferer. I am not my conditioning. I am not this body. I am not this mind. I am not this person. That is the end of suffering. But it doesn't happen like that. It's going to rear its head. We've been identified with the separate self for lifetimes. So it's going to keep coming up for a while. But, good news, right? You hold all the cards. The truth is on your side. You hold all the cards. No problem with evil. Oops. So there's no problem with creation. Nope. Catherine London says, hi GP, satsangs are great, but what are you talking about here? Can't be seen as long as the separate self seems real. Yes. No exploration or understanding can bring awakening. Liberation happens or not, and it is unconditional, whatever the person seems to do. Right. But the being drawn to satsang, being drawn to this inquiry is not the person's doing. That is the appearing of awareness. That is the awakening, right? Right. So don't mistake that. Don't think that the separate self is the one doing this inquiry. It's not, right? The separate self has no interest in spiritual inquiry. It's too busy trying to manipulate circumstances to get what it wants and to avoid suffering and create pleasure. It's way too busy doing it. It does not want to do this. Now, it gets a little inkling, well, maybe if I get enlightened, that's the ultimate pleasure. And then it kind of puts on the garment of the spiritual person and the like. But the substance of non-dual inquiry is not coming from the person. It is coming from your true being. That's grace. It appears as you doing the inquiry. And yes, the ultimate realization is that liberation just happens. But this is it happening. Don't think of it as an instant in a moment. The very fact that you and I are having this conversation is liberation taking place. It is liberation expunging the ignorance, expunging the misunderstandings, the illusions. This is what had happened, and so the impulse to do inquiry is coming from the true self. Right? It seems, because we're identified with the separate self, it seems like the separate self is doing the inquiry, but it's not. That's a mistake. That's an illusion. It's not true. The separate self doesn't do anything. It always takes credit for stuff after the fact. It's the clown in the circus that takes the bow when the acrobats perform. It never does anything. It is a projection on what consciousness is doing. Consciousness is waking itself. So no exploration or understanding can bring awakening. No, it cannot bring awakening. Awakening brings awakening. Awakening brings exploration and understanding. That's where it comes from, right? Otherwise, if that didn't happen, because the person can't do it, the separate self cannot do it for sure. If it doesn't come from it doesn't happen at all, and we are stuck like this forever, right? So it's coming from the very thing that when we looking at it from the point of the separate self, we think we're seeking it. In fact, it's seeking itself. And it is manifesting as you doing an inquiry, you asking these questions, you pondering these things. Even a question like this, well, wait a minute. You can't cause this. Well, you can't cause it. No. I mean, the depth at which you're asking these questions is really gratifying to me. Yes, leave no stone unturned, right? The great doubt. Have great doubt. Doubt it all, right? Just keep pressing and pressing until it's absolutely clear. Yes, awakening is unconditional. Nothing wakes you up. Awakeness awakens to its own awakeness. Strange way to put it. The separate self does not wake up. Awakeness wakes up from the illusion of the separate self. And it finds it's always been awake. You are always awake. Are you not always conscious? Even in deep sleep, when you're out cold, you are still there, conscious, just conscious of nothing. So it appears as though nothing's happening, but it's just, there's no measurement of time or space because no events are taking place. There's no content. Consciousness is totally empty. But you are there, quite aware. So the awakeness is always there. Even when our minds appear to be distracted, we want to be focused here and gets distracted, and we're actually focused over there. You're aware of both of them. The awareness has never gone anywhere, has it? Wonderful. No problem with evil. Not sure your question there, John, or if even John M, are you talking to me? Evil and good are still thought-based, and there's awareness of all that. Attaching to good thoughts and bad thoughts gives rise to good feelings and bad feelings, which leads to misery or happiness. Temporary foundation is awareness. Awareness, it's more of a conversation. These guys are... awareness not have anything to do with evil or good. And then John says that's a nice out to not take responsibility for creation. It's a great little conversation you guys are having, if I may weigh in. To just put it out there and say, well, there's no right and wrong, I've transcended that, is Neo-Advaita again. That's what they'll do, no right and wrong. It's true and it's not true at the same time. The way to get to true transcendence is you just don't dismiss the question of good and evil. It has to be subsumed into a larger perspective. The transcendent has to transcend it, which doesn't mean get rid of it. It means it gets absorbed into a bigger picture in which it's understood. There's no good or evil. It's only a position we take. You know, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? It's all in the perspective you take. What you said is horrible, that's a terrible thing to do. Somebody else thinks it's a great thing to do. Hurt a lot of people, I'd say that's bad. Somebody else hurt a lot of people, fine, I got what I want, right? That's good, right? So to try to come up with an absolute standard of good and evil is what throws us into tyranny and all sorts of disastrous thing. It's a replacement for genuine wisdom by law, because there's no spiritual insight there. But that doesn't mean I can just not take responsibility for stuff. I mean, that's ludicrous. That's absolutely ludicrous. It's chaotic. It's anarchistic. That means that, oh yeah, well, children are dying because they're starving, but I've got $1 billion. I'm fine, right? You can see that on another level, it simply doesn't hold water. You can understand that it is a perspective that somebody could actually believe, right? But the greater perspective is one of universal love, universal oneness, universal unanimity, singularity. So when you look at any of these things, it's the same measurement I've been giving all night, which is which fountain is this coming out of? Which fountain is this arising in? Which is the... And when you look at that, you see that from the fountain of oneness, there's less and less of a need on my part to take a position. It lets me see all positions, but simultaneously I can actually see the relative value of those positions. Not because I've taken another position, but because I haven't taken a position. Christ put it beautifully. He says, judge not, so you are not judged. He says, I judge, but my judgment is just because I seek not my own will, but the will of the Father that sent me. So his discernment was not judgment. It was not the taking of a position. And that's where we have to go with this. And we have to do it in such a loving way that the so-called evildoers are corrected, not condemned. We're being brought into a higher light, a light that is more loving, but not my local provincial idea of what love is because it's suitable for me, but is truly is love on a much more transcendent level that's hard to talk about, right? Because you can't put it in simply in terms of good and evil, right and wrong. Yet at the same time, discernment of what is the best, most valuable, most loving thing in a moment becomes quite naturally clear. It's like the discerning of beauty. Why is one thing beautiful and something not so? One thing a great piece of art, another thing just an okay piece of art. Who can possibly put that, articulate that? Yet we know it's so. So there is something in us that intrinsically knows what is the best, right? But it's not just a position of good and evil. That's kind of a low-level morality, ethical thing. We're looking for something that's much more transcendent. Nikomuk, I have no idea what you said. Get some smiles and hearts from Liza. John M., what happens to people when they die without a non-dual understanding? Which is most people. Yes, absolutely. Well, the same thing happened to you. Right? It just keeps happening. That's Shiva's wheel. Right? Without an understanding what's happening, the same thing repeats itself over and over again. You don't have to turn into an esoteric afterlife. I mean, look what happens. We do it all the time in one life, right? Let alone many. We repeat the same mistake over and over again. Why? Because we're not conscious of it. But when you stop and look for a minute and go, oh man, what a blunder that is. And then you feel there's some momentum that wants to keep doing the blunder anyway, right? But the wisdom, the insight grows, gets big enough that eventually that particular pattern gets negated. And that energy doesn't repeat itself anymore. It's no different when one body dissolves. That energy pattern just continues to go until it is completely exhausted of all of the energy. And the energy that's feeding it is our belief in it, the belief in a separate self that surfaces in every lifetime. Once that's finally seen through, the sense of a separate self no longer needs to arise. All of the seeds of the vasanas have been burnt, and that does not have to arise. That's what it means to be free from rebirth. It doesn't mean free from manifestation. Manifestation goes on forever. You are just no longer feel bound by it. You are the infinite consciousness in which it's happening. This life really is a dream. Yes, the cure to suffering is to acknowledge the separate ego. The world has one too. The suffering is being departed from who we are. Yes. Let's see. So it's to acknowledge the separate ego. To acknowledge it as an illusion, not as an entity. That the ego is nothing but a bunch of programmed reactive patterns in your nervous system. And not a person, not an entity, not a being. It feels like it is because all these thoughts and stuff are being generated. But what it really is an energetic assumption underneath that says, I am the body. So the world, in that sense, we could say we have a collective ego. Well, you have a collective. Every individual has a collective ego. There's not one part of you there. You really look close, you find all sorts of contradictory things, little arguments going on inside our head. What is that? The ego isn't one thing. The ego is a bunch of different things that we have just kind of simplified and called it the ego. It's a complex. It's a matrix of stuff that we've just kind of aggregated, abstracted into a single word, and now we want to act as if it is a thing. It's not a thing. And so you get a group of people in a community, and that gets an ego. You get people in a church. Look at some of these churches like Westboro Baptist Church, where, if I meet some of these people individually, I have no doubt they're probably really good people. They get together in this group the mob ego, and suddenly they're saying and doing these horrendously awful things, right? That's the ego emerges. The ego is not a fixed thing. It emerges, it comes, it goes. It comes together in this group, reforms itself in that group. But it's nothing other than a sense of self that doesn't actually exist as an entity. And that's really all you need to know about it. So the world doesn't have an ego. Right? When you look at life, nature, the way it doesn't have an ego. It is just life flowing. All of the ego is a projection of the human mind, and that's where it has to be. It has to be met. This life really is a dream. Amen. Just like it says in the song. Thanks for your answer. Wow, looking at who's causing the attachment suffering never occurred to me with manifestation. Certainly have done that inquiry by itself, but not with manifestation. Yes, because when you step into the world of manifestation, it's suddenly, we have all of these pent-up desires, right? And I want to have this thing, because most of the manifestation, it's for something external to come to you. But the desire is already a manifestation. Do you realize that? If you have a desire for something, it's already made manifest. Right? That is the manifestation. Where did that come from? Did you make it up? No. The desire spontaneously arose out of this infinite vast ocean of potential. That desire arose. That is a manifestation. Whenever the formless takes form, it's manifestation. You didn't create the desire, it's destiny, nothing about it. You are simply the witness of it. You saw it happening. Now, the sense of a separate self gets a hold of that and says, that's my desire, I want for that, and then starts trying to make them happen. It does that. That you can easily trace back to the sense of a separate self. Let that go, and just when there's a strong desire for something, let go of the story, let go of the manifestation, the desire to even manifest it, and just be with the feeling of that desire all by itself. And one of two things will happen. It'll either just dissolve, right, because that was it, right? Or there'll be a sense of equanimity about it. It'll have life in it. It'll actually feel pleasurable rather than painful, right? There'll be a sense of joy in the desire itself, not just a projection in the future of when it's fulfilled for the joy. There'll be happiness in the desire. And at that point, you won't fight with it anymore. It'll either fulfill itself or it won't. And it won't make any difference because you've got what you actually want, which is happiness. That's all you want. That's the only reason we'd want anything at all out there is for the happiness of it. Once we don't need objects to make us happy, the thing out there isn't going to make us happy. Once we know that, it isn't that desire stops. Now the motivation of desire is not to get, it's to give. Now it becomes the vehicle for self-expression, not the vehicle for self-fulfillment. David and Aline, thanks, GP. Love and blessings. Blessings to you. Have a great time. We will miss you. John, I do get the impression, though, that when many people get into spiritual path like Advaita, but haven't created, say, reasonably solid financial success, they check out or use spirituality to avoid. They can. Yeah, they can, yes. There are many different traps, and we all have to be honest enough to say, am I using this as a means for avoiding confronting something? And it's easy enough to check that. Just kind of be with what it is that you want to do and don't want to do, or all the arguments you have about it, and just be with the feeling of it. Just sit with the sensation of it. Where's this feeling coming from? Remember, the ultimate achievement is the embracing of life as it is, which means the finances, the relationships, the hard conversations, that all of it, this is life. Embracing life, letting life guide you into the highest wisdom. I mean, let's face it, life survives by feeding on other life. There's nothing on this planet that doesn't have to eat something else living on this planet. I mean, think about that. The utter horror of that. The plants don't. They just suck things up out of the earth, but then we eat the plants. In order for life to be sustained, it has to eat life. Now, if you just stop and think about that for a moment, it will freeze you in your tracks. Go, whoa. I have to. My spirituality has to be able to encounter that and make sense of it, and not just kind of push it under the rug. I also have to take responsibility for that. Well, how can I minimize the amount of damage that I do, right? So I don't eat meat, right? I don't want to cause that kind of harm to anything. So I want to minimize, but I know for a fact I can't get away from it completely. Right? So I eat vegetables instead. Same thing. So it's a willingness to be completely and totally present with life as it is the objective here. And then transcend it. Not transcend does not mean avoid. It means totally transcend. Which means it's subsumed into it. It is not separate from it. Thanks, GP, says Catherine. Catherine says, yes, it happened without the me. It was there while the body was in deep sleep. Then the body opened its eyes and nothing changed. I was still there. Beautiful. Then the me came back along with a story. Thanks for your insights, GP. It's great. Oh, you're wonderful. Just notice that it does come back, and that's okay. As long as you know that it's not you, it now, instead of controlling you, it becomes your interface for the world. So now you get to play fully the role of Catherine London. You know, Catherine London, starring the true self, right? It's like, you've just you're in a play now. You're playing some important role in a play, but you now know it's a play. But you play her part, and you'll find that when you know you're not her, and that she has a lot more talents and creativity and utility than you ever imagined. You find she's a really great instrument. Clay Sue says, I am awareness, food. Yes. Mr. Pleasant, IGP, as awareness, are we completely silent and all voices and dialogue going inside merely like cars passing by? Or is it a mix? Yes, but it's not. Yeah, awareness in the absolute is absolute silence. But the silence gives rise to sound, to Om, to music, right? To the cars on the streets, to the clouds passing in the sky. It's not like an act of will on the part of awareness. It's not thinking about what it's going to say, right? Because the moment that thought appears, it's created, right? Awareness doesn't deliberate and then create. That's our very limited sense of a God that thinks stuff up and then makes it, and makes a creation separate from itself. The act of conceiving is the act of creation from awareness, and it is a spontaneous, not a deliberated creation. It's just a right. Awareness plays jazz. It just happens, right? But it's consistent always with the nature of awareness. It's never inconsistent with the nature of awareness, which means it's primarily love. So we're running out of time here, so I'll speed up a little bit. Thanks, GP. Great to have your wise take on everything. Not nothing, as ever. Thank you, San. David Rose, great Satsang, GP. Namaste. Namaste to you all. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How far? Oh, wow, almost a half an hour over. Okay, well, thank you all for being here as always. Please share this with your friends, and I am going to be doing a donation-based workshop coming up, probably a week or two. I'm trying to decide between, I was talking about attention and belief. I was talking about that. I'm trying to decide between that and just doing some really practical stuff about EFT and, handling the difficult things that come up for us. So, Jay, thank you, GP. Better explanation. I wasn't trying to negate responsibility. No, I know you weren't. Yeah, not at all. But we have to see the big picture. You can see how easily somebody could. So we just have to be really precise with our words and the like. So, GP rocks the socks off the locks of the mocks. Spiritual guru. Thank you, John. I've never had a cheer before. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for loving this kind of an inquiry. Love you all. Namaste.